Hello and welcome to Global Sign's webinar, Making the Case for Digital Signatures. I'm Janine Markey with the Global Sign marketing team, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment and introduce our presenter, Sid Desai. He's our Director of Sales Engineering and is responsible for leading a team of engineers helping our customers implement advanced managed PKI solutions. We'd like you guys to all interact with us. So if you have any questions at all throughout the presentation, please go ahead and submit them using the GoToWebinar question box. We'll keep track and try to answer them all at the end of the webinar. We'll also be recording today's webinar and we'll ensure everyone receives a recorded copy at the end of the webinar. So take a minute today to cover some of the topics that you'll learn during today's webinar. We'll go through an introduction into digital signatures and the benefits of implementing them. We'll take a behind-the-scenes look at how digital signatures work, and we'll look at the deployment options available. We'll also wrap up with some real-life example customer use cases. And with that said, I'd like to hand it over to Sid to get started with the webinar.
All right. Well, thank you, Janine, for that intro. So as Janine mentioned, my role here at Global Sign is to help understand and implement managed PKI solutions for our customers. So what we've noticed lately is that digital signatures and the ability to digitally sign documents is quite a hot topic, but there seems to be a general sense of confusion in this space. Now, some of you on the call here today might represent a private or a public organization, or perhaps even a government organization. No matter how big or small your company is, the interest and the type of use cases around digital signatures remain the same. The eventual end goal for anyone who is planning on using digital signatures is to automate resource-heavy, paper-based signing processes. Now, because we may have audiences here today who may each have their own needs, I may not be able to cover each and every possible scenario around the use and deployment of digital signatures, but we'll try to cover as much ground as possible. So let's dive in. So the biggest advantages of switching to a digital signature solution is cost savings. Most of you may take into account cost of paper as one of the main factors that drives up cost, but it doesn't just end there. Real costs of paper-based signatures do not just include the cost of paper, but also the printing, photocopying, distribution, storage, scanning, and disposal costs. Almost immediately, you start seeing savings that can be achieved by switching to digital signatures. Now, transportation cost savings is also a pretty big advantage, and my personal favorite, shortened transaction times. Think about how many times you've had to wait for somebody else to print a piece of document, sign it, scan it, and email it back to you. I think we've all been there on the waiting line for somebody else to get back to you with the signed paper, only for you to print it again for record keeping. So if you're looking at a return of investment by switching to digital signatures, here are some stats for you. Recent industry success stories, some of which we'll talk about in the later part of the presentation, cite millions of dollars being saved in administrative paper-related processes. 75% reduction in error rates, 85% reduction in shipping costs, and 80 to 90% adoption rates. Amazing. In fact, in a study on the benefits of e-signatures, Ombud Research came up with the following numbers. With the use of digital signatures, it costs $20 less per document compared to paper-based signatures. So as we can see, the benefits are plenty. So apart from the cost savings, there's also some soft benefits associated with the overall improved customer experience. You really want your customers to be happy and satisfied, and cut back on the actual cycle times of the processes that you have undergoing. This not only improves compliance, but also reduces environmental impact, just to name a few. All right, so now that we've talked about the cost savings and the market drivers, let's do a quick overview on what digital signatures are. Firstly, you have to understand that not all electronic signatures are digital signatures. Electronic signature is a broad term used to refer to any type of digitized version of a physical signature and can be as simple as a scanned image of somebody's signature. The signature may or may not be verified by a third party and often do not contain any measures to prevent changes to the document. Digital signatures, on the other hand, are a more secure type of electronic signature and are based on public key infrastructure, PKI technology. So when someone receives a digitally signed document, he or she knows where the document came from via the identity of the signer, when it was signed, thanks to a third-party timestamp that is applied at the time of signing, and that the content of the document has not been altered since the signature was applied. Behind the scenes, there are crypto operations applied to the document that keeps it entirely secure. We'll take a look at how this works in a couple of slides. So there are two main components of a digital signature, and this process and this component kind of stretches out across all different solutions that are out there in the market. A digital certificate is one of the main components, and the document that you want to sign is the other one. A digital certificate is kind of a virtual passport. A third-party verification entity called a certificate authority, such as GlobalSign, verifies your identity and issues you a certificate. Since the certificate is unique to you, using it to sign a document is a way to prove, yes, it's really me signing this document. And when you apply a digital signature, a crypto operation binds to your digital certificate and the data being signed, for example, a PDF or any other document, into one unique fingerprint. The uniqueness of the two components of the signature, the signer's identity and the data, are what makes digital signatures a viable replacement to wet ink signatures. Let's take a closer look at what that means. Okay, so when you're signing a document using digital signatures, what is it that you're really looking for? Well, one of the first things you should be looking for is that you want assurance that the document hasn't been changed somewhere in the workflow. That's integrity. You also want assurance that the signer of the document is who we think it is and not somebody else. So you want the authenticity from this signature. And lastly, we basically want assurance that the person who signed the document can't deny the fact that he signed it. And that's non-repudiation. So before we get into how we satisfy these three criteria, let's take a quick look at how digital signatures work. So the crypto processes going on behind the scenes that help digital signatures meet their goals typically work like this. When you click sign in a digital document or digital signature compliant program such as Adobe Acrobat or Microsoft Office, a unique digital fingerprint called a hash of the document is created using a mathematical algorithm. This hash is specific to this particular document. So even the slightest change in the document would result in a different hash. Now this hash is later on encrypted using the private key from one of your digital certificates. And then the encrypted hash and your public key are combined into a digital signature which is appended to the document. The digitally signed document is now ready to be shared. So on the receiving end, let's take a look at what happens when somebody opens the document that you've digitally signed. When your recipient opens the document, the program automatically uses the signer's public key, which was included in the digital signature with the document, to decrypt the documented hash. The program then calculates the new hash for the document. If this new hash matches the decrypted hash from step 1, the program knows that the document has not been altered with and displays a message that shows the document had not been modified since the signature was applied. The program will also display the identity of the signer based on the public key that was used to apply the signature. So are we meeting our needs? Let's check. For integrity, the hash comparison checks if the document has been altered. If the hashes are the same, we've passed this check. The public key confirms the author's identity and confirms the authenticity of the sender. So we're okay there. And finally, to satisfy non-repudiation, if the hash can be decrypted with the public key, the document was signed with the corresponding private key, which should be in the sole possession of the owner. So we've also passed this check. So let's take a quick look at what a digitally signed document looks like. So here is an example of a digitally signed PDF. There are two types of digital signatures applied to this document: a certified signature and an approval signature. A certified signature, as shown in this image here, attests to the contents of the document and allows the signer to specify the types of changes allowed to the document to remain certified. Change options include no changes form fill-in only and form fill-in and commenting. Certified signatures are displayed at the top of the PDF as a blue ribbon and a blue bar, as shown in this image. The name of the signer, their organization, and the certificate authority is clearly displayed. This information is all pulled directly from the public key used to apply the signature. Excuse me. Approval signatures, which we can see down at the bottom of the PDF, are performed when someone signs a document to show consent, approval, and acceptance. An approval signature can be customizable to display an image, such as your physical signature or an engineering seal, for instance. If you click through the signature details, you can see a note that the document has been modified since it was signed. And if the hashes hadn't matched, meaning the document had been altered in any way, you would see a red X at the top of the document rather than a blue ribbon. So we often get asked about signature expiration. And this is an important topic because digital signatures are tied to digital certificates, which have an expiration date, or certificates can be revoked. So people often worry about what's going to happen to the signature after the certificate is no longer valid. Well, with some signatures, once your certificate expires, the signature on the document will show a warning indicating that it's no longer valid, as indicated by the yellow triangles on the graphic here. Revoking a certificate will result in something different. The signature in this case will break, invalidating the signature. So how do you survive revocation and expiration in cases like these? The reason these events cause problems in the first place is because when the software goes to validate the signature, it checks the actual validity of the signing certificate at that moment in time, even if the signature was actually applied months or years ago. Now, this is not really a problem per se, because that's the true nature of certificates and digital signatures, but you really want to choose a digital signature option that includes long-term validity or a trusted third-party stamp. And a digital signature with these options will allow the signature to be valid even after the certificate has actually expired. Now, revocation works a little bit differently because you wouldn't want that certificate or that signature to be trusted if the certificate is revoked in any way. So now that we've seen the technology behind digital signatures and how they work, let's take a look at how to actually implement these in your environment. So let's first talk about the client-side option. So the client-side option is ideally used for lower volume signing. The signing certificate is usually stored on a USB token, and signatures are most often applied using a desktop application like Adobe Acrobat or an in-house custom creation. Now, there are also industry-specific applications like Bluebeam that a lot of people use for engineering applications. And most client-side deployments are common when an individual person needs to sign on something. For example, an engineering firm that needs each engineer to sign off on project plans, lab reports in biopharma, insurance documentation for healthcare professions, and so on. So let's look at an example to understand this use case. So we work with a customer called Clow Harbor and Associates. As in many engineering and architectural firms, Clow Harbor and Associates, their engineers actually go through manually signing thousands of engineering drawings that ultimately get converted to a PDF for final distribution and archiving. Now, the document delivery process was time-consuming and not conducive to meeting tight deadlines. Finalized documents required an engineering seal on every page, as well as signature of the professional engineer that authored and or approved the document. Now, after the process was complete, the document was forwarded to CHA's Document Production Center, where it would be scanned into a PDF and printed several hundred times. What GlobalSign did is offered a solution where our PDF signing solution allowed CHA to digitally sign PDFs within Adobe Acrobat, entirely eliminating the need to sign each physical document and then scan it into a PDF. The solution is fully compliant with state regulations surrounding digital signatures and saves CHA a lot of time and resources. So let's take a look at the server-side use case. The server-side option is ideal for companies using an internally developed on or off-the-shelf automated document generation software. And this software is used to generate and manage large volumes of documents typically. The signing certificate is typically stored on an HSM, our hardware security module, and GlobalSign supports on-premise HSM deployments, but also offer a hosted option for the HSMs, where the signing credential is actually stored on a virtual HSM partition. Server-side deployments are commonly used for certifying signatures when you want to lock down a document from future changes, and usually use a company or departmental credential. For example, an insurance company that might digitally sign all new insurance applications. So let's take a look at an example in this case. So Colombian Mutual Life Insurance Company is one of our customers, and the challenge they had was they wanted to improve the quality of new business submissions and reduce the turnaround time for application submission to commission payment and delivery of the issued policy to the customer. To achieve these goals, they sought a digital signature solution to replace the existing paper-based workflows. So Colombian's digital signature implementation needed to be able to produce a digitally signed and timestamped document with similar legal integrity as the signed paper application. Now, to encourage agents to adopt this new online application as a replacement to paper-based processes that they were comfortable with, it was imperative that the digital signature be fast, be painless, and instantly recognizable as a valid by any PDF reader, any PDF application. So the solution that GlobalSign offered is, since Columbia Mutual is using server-based solution, there's no need for any tokens or additional hardware to apply signatures. The signing certificate is stored and protected on a hardware security module hosted by GlobalSign, and the sales agent reviews a policy application with the customer, and upon approval from the customer for the content, uploads the application to the signing server with a click of a button. So the signing server, on the other hand, converts the application to PDF, timestamps, and applies the company's digital signature by talking to the HSM on the cloud. The policy is complete within minutes, significantly decreasing turnaround time compared to traditional paper-based methods. So this is what GlobalSign offered to Colombian Life Mutual to help them with their digitally signing documents. So this pretty much brings us to the end of this presentation material. I would like to say, though, before we take any questions, all of this material, including the case studies that we discussed today, are all available in the PDF form on our website. And I'm sure Janine will be able to give you more details around that. So over to you, Janine.
Great. Thank you, Sid. That was a lot of great information. I hope this webinar helps all of our listeners today understand what digital signatures are, how they work, and how they may be able to benefit from implementing digital signatures into their organization. So we'll go ahead and take any questions that anyone has at this time. We did get a question regarding, and Sid mentioned, the slides of the webinar will be available on our website. What we'll go ahead and do is, if you registered for the webinar, we'll email you a copy of the live webinar recording as well as a slide deck that you can download. So we hope to have that email out within the next day or so. Let's take a look at some of the questions here. The first question we have here, can multiple users share digital certificates for digital signatures?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So certificates are issued to actual individuals or an organization or a department. So if you have, or if you need one or multiple people to sign using the same kind of signature, what you can do is you can have the organization or a department sign certificate, and you can have multiple people use that same certificate to sign the document.
Great.
So yes, the answer is you can definitely have multiple users share a single certificate.
We covered this question a little bit, but maybe we can touch upon it. What type of documents can you apply digital signatures to? Are there any restrictions?
Well, you can sign multiple types of documents. Adobe PDF is widely used with all our customers, and a lot of our customers also use Microsoft Office or any other type of word processing systems. But for the most part, if they're looking to have some kind of digital documentation in a PDF format, Adobe PDF is the most widely used standard.
Great. We're getting a few questions surrounding some of the new regulations that are out regarding the EIDAS regulation, which I think Sid will probably have to do a little bit more research into, but some questions about how companies can comply with the new regulations and what would be the main problems with the new regulation.
Yeah, so that's a fair question, Janine. I think that there's a bit more research that we have to do on our end because there's a lot of regulations in different countries.
Yep.
We've had customers talk to us from the European region, who each European region has a different type of standard that they operate on, and so we have to comply with all of these standards. The good part about using a digital certificate-based solution is it's widely acceptable across all standards. So as long as you can issue an identity or a certificate to a company or a user that can certify that user or that company, it should be valid throughout any standard.
Okay, and yeah, for these questions that we need to do a little bit more research on, or we can specifically reach out to these individuals, provide more details for specific use cases. The next question is, got a few more that came in. How do you employ the signing of a document by the vendor and the customer? I'm not sure, Sid. I think that may be speaking directly to maybe putting into a B2C use case. So we may need to further clarify that question.
Yeah, I didn't quite get the question, so if you wouldn't mind repeating, I can try to provide at least an answer of some sort.
The the attendee put another comment in essence, signing at different times with the document going back and forth. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so you can definitely have that. You can have multiple signatures on the document, and the document can be signed by multiple users at different time scales. So yes, we do support that.
Great. And there was one other question. Does my recipient need special software to receive my digitally signed document?
No, the good thing about digitally signed documents is the recipients of your document, they don't really need any additional software. For example, a regular Adobe Reader or Adobe PDF should just do fine, and they can verify the signatures right on the Adobe program.
Great. Well, we haven't received any other questions, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. And again, we'll send out an email within the next day or two with the recorded version of the webinar. And thank you again, everyone, for your time today.